Speaking Part 3 Friends. 1. What do you think are the most important qualities for friends to have? Maybe the most important things are that friends need to share common interests and be honest with each other. Friends are people we spend a lot of time with, so it definitely helps if they enjoy doing the same activities or talking about the same topics as we do. And of course, we need to be able to trust our friends, so honesty is vital for a good friendship. I think I would struggle to become friends with someone who didn't have anything in common with me, or who wasn't reliable or trustworthy. 2. How important do you think it is for a person to spend some time alone? I'd say that it's essential to spend a bit of time alone, even if it's just a few minutes a day. When you have a few minutes to yourself, it's a chance to take stock and reflect on things. Most of us live such busy lives that our brains need time to catch up every now and then. Personally, I try to have a bit of me time every day. I'll go for a coffee or find a quiet place to sit and read the newspaper. If I never had any time alone, I think I'd go mad. 3. Why do you think friendship is important? I think friendship is important for all sorts of reasons. We need friends to share experiences with, to talk to, and for support. In my case, I like to meet up with friends at the weekend to do something enjoyable, like see a film or go out for dinner. I like chatting with my friends about what we've been doing during the week or about what's happening in the world. Without friends to talk to, life would be dull and boring. We would only have our families to talk to. Speaking Part 3 History. 1. What do you think we can learn by studying events of the past? I think we can learn a lot by studying history. Just as individual people learn from their mistakes, societies can learn from the mistakes made by previous governments or leaders. For example, from what I've read in the newspapers, many economists are looking back to the time of the Great Depression, around 80 years ago, in order to understand the financial crisis that is currently affecting many countries around the world. Even if we don't always learn from mistakes, I think it's fascinating to study history because it gives us an insight into who we are and where we come from. 2. What important events do you think might take place in the future? It's really difficult to predict what will happen in the future. Most of the big, historic events of the past would have been impossible to foresee. For example, I don't think that anyone living 100 years ago could have imagined that people would one day walk on the moon. If I had to guess what might happen in the future, I'd like to think that scientists will invent cures for diseases like cancer and we'll all live longer. Speaking Part 3 Politeness. 1. In your country's culture, how do you show that you are being polite? We really value politeness and good manners in the UK, and there are many types of polite behavior. One of the first things we learn as children is to say please and thank you. As adults, I think we are careful not to be too direct in the language we use. For example, we would never say, "Bring me the bill," in a restaurant because this kind of direct instruction would sound rude. It would be much more polite to say, "Could we have the bill, please?" 2. Are we less polite with members of our families than with people we don't know? I suppose it's normal to be a bit more relaxed about politeness with family members. Most people tend to speak in a more informal way at home. In the UK, we still say please and thanks, but it's fine to use colloquial language and things like nicknames that you would never use with someone you didn't know. Celebrities. 1. Are there any differences between the types of people who were seen as celebrities in the past and those who are celebrities nowadays? Yes, I think there have been some big changes in the types of people who become famous. In the past, before the invention of television, I suppose there were very few national or international celebrities. Maybe kings and queens, military, political, and religious leaders were the only household names. With the advent of TV and radio, performers such as actors and musicians became more well known. However, we now seem to have a completely new breed of celebrity as a result of reality television programs. These are people who don't really have any special skills as performers, but who are famous for just being themselves. Speaking Part 3. Products. 1. Why do people like buying products from their own countries rather than imported ones? I suppose it's because those people want to support the economy of the country they live in. If they buy something that was made in their own country, they know that they are contributing to the salaries of workers within the same country, whereas if they buy imported items, a foreign company and its employees will benefit. For example, if I buy some meat that originates from a local farm rather than a farm in another country, I'm helping one of my fellow citizens to carry on in business. Also, I think that trust is an issue. People might feel that they can trust domestically produced items more than imported ones. Speaking Part 3. Cities and Countryside 1. How is life different in cities compared to rural areas? Firstly, the cost of living in cities is much higher. Housing is much more expensive in cities compared to rural areas. Everything costs more. I think life in cities is more difficult. There are more people, so there's more competition for jobs. Life is a lot slower in rural areas. Everyone knows each other, and there's a sense of community. I don't think rural areas experience the social problems that you find in cities, like crime and homelessness. Point 2. How do you think life in cities could be made easier? In my opinion, cities need to be well planned. Good public transport can definitely make life easier because there are so many people and it can be really stressful just to move around. Public areas like parks are also important because people need space to relax, and I think cities should be made into healthier places to live and work. 3. What do you think cities will be in 50 years' time? I imagine cities will be less polluted because we'll have electric cars and better public transport. More people might work from home, so maybe cities won't be so busy. But I think there will probably still be problems because more and more people are migrating to cities. So I'm not so optimistic about issues like crime, homelessness, and unemployment. 1. What advantages does living in the countryside have compared to living in a city? I think there are some clear advantages to living in the countryside. First, with the clean air and lack of traffic or industry, countryside areas are much healthier places than the average city. Another benefit would be the sense of community that comes with living in a small village where everyone knows each other. Finally, it seems to me that the pace of life in the countryside is slower, and the people are more laid back and friendly, compared to the hustle and bustle and the stress of city life. 2. Have areas of countryside in your country changed since you were a child? No, they haven't changed very much where I live. The reason for this is that countryside areas close to Manchester tend to be protected, and so construction is not allowed. For example, I live quite close to an area called the Peak District, and nothing seems to have changed there since I was young. The hills, paths, and woodland areas are just as they were. 3. Do you think that visits to the countryside should be something that schools offer to their children? Yes, I think it's a great idea for schools to take children on trips to the countryside, especially if those children live in a large town or city. A visit to the countryside can be both relaxing and educational. Children can go for walks in the fresh air and at the same time see animals and plants that they may never have seen before. If schools don't offer this opportunity, some children will never see life outside the city. Speaking Part 3: Rivers, Lakes, Oceans. 1. What do you think are the functions of rivers nowadays? Rivers have various functions. In the UK, they were probably more important in the past because they were used for the transportation of goods, but I suppose this is still the case in many parts of the world. Rivers can be used as a source of renewable energy in the production of hydroelectric power, and they are also a source of fresh water for drinking and irrigation. Leisure activities are another function: fishing, canoeing, swimming, bathing. I'm sure there are many other things I haven't thought of. 2. What do you think of boats and ships as forms of transportation? I'm not really a fan of boats and ships. If I'm going abroad, I like to get to my destination quickly, so I prefer traveling by plane. Of course, ships are vital for the transportation of oil and other heavy cargo. 3. Why do some people like to live near rivers, lakes, or the sea? Well, the view is probably a major factor. Most people like to look out to sea or across a river or lake. I'd much prefer to look out of my window onto a natural landscape than an apartment building in a city. Then there's the lifestyle. If you live by the sea, for example, you can lie on the beach, go for a swim, or do water sports like surfing or water skiing. I definitely wouldn't mind living near a beach at some point in my life. Speaking Part 3: Emotions. 1. Do you think it's good to show your emotions when you're angry? I think it depends on the situation and how you show your emotions. I find that if I'm angry with a friend or someone in my family, it's best to tell them what the problem is and try to express how I feel. However, I don't think it helps to argue with people when you're angry. It's better to control the anger and explain what's wrong. 2. In your opinion, do women show their emotions more than men? The stereotypical view is that women are more emotional, and in my experience, there is some truth in this. My mother, for example, tends to show her feelings much more readily than my father. However, I'm sure that there are exceptions to the stereotype. 3. Why do you think men tend to show their emotions less than women? Maybe it's because of the way we are brought up. I think that boys are often taught from an early age not to cry. Also, boys are aware that their friends might see it as a sign of weakness if they show their feelings. Perhaps girls are brought up to be more sensitive to their friends' feelings. Speaking Part 3: Life. 1. Do you think people had easier lives 50 years ago? Yes, maybe life was simpler and less stressful 50 years ago. The mobile phone didn't exist, so I suppose it was easier to forget about work at the end of the day because people couldn't contact you so easily. 2. Do you think life will be more stressful in the future? Yes, it probably will be more stressful. As the world gets smaller, employees will probably have to travel to different countries more often and stay in touch with colleagues and clients all over the world. There will also be more competition for jobs and the cost of living will keep going up. Speaking Part 3: Technology, Internet. 1. What technology or equipment is used in workplace nowadays? Advice. Give a list of different technologies, then talk about one in detail. In most workplaces, people use equipment such as computers, phones, printers, fax machines, and photocopiers. I think the computer is probably the most essential piece of equipment because we rely on it for almost everything: communicating by mail, writing reports, organizing data, and finding information on the internet. 2. Does technology help workers or does it make their lives more difficult? Technology definitely helps workers because it makes many tasks so much easier. For example, email is such a useful tool for communication between employees in different offices or even in different countries. On the other hand, technology can make life more difficult, especially when it goes wrong. It causes a lot of stress when the internet is down or a computer crashes. 3. What effect does new technology have on employment? I think technology is often responsible for people losing their jobs. Machines have replaced people in areas like manufacturing and agriculture, and whenever a new technology is introduced, there are redundancies. At the same time, jobs might be created thanks to a new technology. There would be no computer programmers if the computer hadn't been invented. 4. How do you think the internet will affect our lives in the future? I think the internet will have a huge impact on our lives. More and more people are using social websites to keep in touch with friends. I think the internet will probably replace TV because most channels are already available online. Also, I think we'll do more online shopping. Web-based companies like Amazon are already really successful. In the future, there will probably be more companies that only sell via the internet, and I expect we'll spend more money online than in traditional shops. Schools and universities might also use the internet to provide courses, so online learning will probably become a normal part of life. Speaking Part 3. Status Symbol. 1. In your country, what possessions show a higher status or position in society? In my country, people who are wealthy tend to buy big houses and cars. Certain makes of cars such as Mercedes or Ferrari are status symbols. They let other people know that you are important or powerful. People who want to give this impression often wear expensive designer clothes or watches by brands like Rolex. 2. Do you think we place too much importance on possessions? Probably yes. Some people are obsessed with showing off their new mobile phone or wearing the latest fashions. I think it's a problem for teenagers because there's a lot of peer pressure to follow fashion or buy the latest gadget that their friends have got. 3. Do you think things were different 50 years ago? Yes, maybe people were less materialistic. I think they bought things that lasted longer. My grandparents talk about how they repaired things rather than throwing them away. Maybe brands and advertising weren't as powerful as they are now. Speaking Part 3. Children Toys. 1. Do you think it's important for boys to play with boys' toys and for girls to only play with girls' toys? I think boys naturally seem to prefer playing with boys' toys and girls with girls' toys. When I was young, I had toy cars, trucks, guns, and things like that, whereas my sister always wanted to play with dolls. I don't suppose it really matters if a boy plays with a doll or a girl plays with a toy car, but children learn quickly what toys are supposed to be for boys and for girls. 2. Do you think it's good if parents only buy educational toys for their children? No, I don't agree with only giving children educational toys. In my opinion, children learn by playing with whatever interests them. Children invent their own games, even if they don't have any toys at all. It's important for children just to have fun. There will be plenty of time for parents to worry about education when their children get older. Speaking Part 3 Money. 1. Why is it important for people to save some off-term money? In the long term, I think it's important to save for retirement. But it's also a good idea to have a certain amount of money saved so that you can deal with unexpected problems in the less distant future. For example, I've learned to put some money aside for car repairs, and this came in useful recently when I needed to have my car's brake pads changed. If I hadn't had savings, the cost of getting my car repaired could have sent me into the red. 2. In your view, should children be taught how to manage money? Not at school, no. I believe it's the job of parents to gradually teach children that kind of thing, or perhaps there's no need for anyone to teach children about money because they learn about it naturally as they grow up. For example, I remember being given money to buy sweets or an ice cream when I was a child. Andy soon learnt what I could afford and what I couldn't. 3. Do you think that girls are better at saving money than boys? I've never thought about that before. I don't see any reason why girls would be better savers than boys or vice versa. I suppose it depends more on the personality of each individual and what their interests are. For example, a child who likes cheap toys might not think about saving, whereas a child who wants to buy something expensive, like a bike or a games console, might summon the willpower to save up.